Joe Tipton at Tipton Edits on Twitter, national recruiting expert on 3 Sports. With us on 365 Sports with Paul and Craig, I'm David Smoke. And, of course, we had the news, what was it, last week or so, on Hunter Dickinson from Michigan to KU, and then Bronny James to USC. Joe Tipton now joins us live on 365 Sports. And, Joe, I saw the note with Dennis Rodman's son to USC. Is USC starting to make a little bit of a run here?
They truly are. I think it started with returning Boogie Ellis, kind of their lead guard, lead scoring guard, coming back for a second year. And obviously Isaiah Collier, arguably the top player in high school basketball, joining them, an elite passer. And then, of course, you just mentioned the news of Bronny James, LeBron's oldest son, going to be joining USC as well. So the Trojans are looking pretty good next year.
Joe, Kansas is completely reset their roster off a team that won the Big 12 last year and didn't have any depth. How do you expect that to change, and do you expect maybe more to follow?
That's a great question. I think there's a good chance that they can add a couple more guys. I know they're strongly in the mix for a 5-star recruit, a senior forward, Mackenzie Mbako, a former Duke signee. He just cut his list to Kansas in Indiana. I'm sure he will be planning on making a decision relatively soon. But obviously, Hunter Dickinson, some had said that he was the top player to ever enter the transfer portal. Huge pickup for the Jayhawks in him, obviously kind of giving them the big man that they needed. Obviously, KJ Adams playing that undersized 5-man for them last year. And we've seen what Bill Self can do, especially with a big man like, Dickinson in the mix. They'll feed him the ball and, he can make things happen. So we'll see who else they can potentially add.
Joe, going back to Bronny James for a second, just what are your thoughts on him as a player? I know that just the name itself is polarizing for many out there, one way or another. But what is USC getting in a player like Bronny? And when it comes to the social media side of things, do you see a bit of a jolt in the interactions when his name is brought up, let's say, in comparison to perhaps others?
Yeah, great question. Bronny, to the average fan, they see his name. They know who his dad is, obviously. But in terms of him as a player, he is not his father. He's not an alpha. He's more of a passive, a connective player. Obviously much shorter than his dad. I think he clocks in at maybe 6'3". But he's still a really good player. His athleticism has grown. He's improved overall. His confidence is at his highest point right now. He's kind of a 3-and-D prototype. Can really share the ball. Really selfless. Great team player and a high character guy as well.
Joe, you mentioned something about overtime elite, the players that were a part of that, and they weren't allowed or eligible for the McDonald's All-Star game. And now I think I saw a follow-up where they are. What was going on with that?
Yeah, so I think it just happened to they hadn't been approved because the overtime elite athletes are separated into 2 groups. One being scholarship players, guys that have not accepted a salary from the organization that will be college eligible. For example, Rob Dillingham headed to Kentucky next year. And then there's also the pro athletes, the guys that did take on a salary that are not eligible for college. So I think there was a little bit of a mix-up in the McDonald's All-American Committee, did not know what to do with that because these scholarship players like Dillingham are playing against, the pros as well. So is it an amateur league or is it a pro league? Well, it's a mix of both. So I think they've ultimately decided, the right decision in allowing these scholarship players, of course, to be eligible for the McDonald's game.
St. John's is popping up on more and more lists for transfers because of Rick Pitino. How's he done so far?
I think several of the guys are big additions. Most recently, R.J. Luis, kind of an underrated player, was a top 150 recruit coming out of high school, went to UMass, put up good numbers, obviously added a few more guys, brought some guys over from Iona, but I don't think he St. John's has fully, satisfied the craving for elite talent. They missed out on a big one in Walter Clayton. He's about to go to Florida over St. John's. But I truly believe in Pitino, and I don't think it will take many. I don't think they'll have many more misses. I think people and players are going to want to play for him.
I would imagine, Joe, that could also apply to the guy I'm about to ask you about in Jerome Tang. I mean, how could you not want to play for that guy? I know a lot of people are very impressed by him this past season. I know they've dipped into the portal a little bit as well, Tyler Perry here in the last month. But what are your thoughts? Are they getting a little bit of that extra oomph from the run this past year? Are you hearing more about them than you typically would? What are your thoughts on where K-State sits?
Yeah, great question. I think the excitement for K-State, even before heading into this past season, where obviously they saw a tremendous amount of success, but just that fan base was reignited when Tang took that job. Even me personally, I didn't even watch K-State basketball before Tang got there, but he's really made that place rocking and rolling. And you see all the clips online and the videos of him getting in the student sections, and people really want to play for Coach Tang. I've talked to a few of the guys that have signed up to play for him, and they just truly love him, and they believe in him, and I don't think there's any doubt anymore. And I think more and more high-level players are going to be considering going to Manhattan, Kansas.
So Baylor has had some attrition. Obviously, the L.J. Cryer news, which had been simmering really for almost, it seemed like about a year or so. They've brought some in. Jalen Bridges is going to test the NBA waters. Adam Flagler is going to go to the Combine. And they've picked up a name or two. They've also picked up a walk-on at Asamoah. They have Robert Wright, who've committed to them. What are your thoughts about the offseason? And they might get both Flagler and Bridges back, but your thoughts on what Scott Drew and his staff have done?
Well, specifically just in the high school ranks, I really like that class that he's bringing in, even though more and more colleges are moving away from the high school basketball. They're focusing more on the portal. I think he's got some really good grabs coming in this class, headlined by Jacoby Walter, 5-star player. I think he's the perfect replacement for Keontae George. Really can get to his spots, good size, really knows how to score the basketball. Baylor fans are really going to like him. An excellent shooter, great defender as well. And then obviously Yves Missi, 5-star big man. He just reclassified from 2024 into 2023, kind of giving him an immediate, additional post presence. He's not a guy that's going to step out and knock down 3-pointers, but he's going to protect the rim. He's fluid, switchable defensively, runs the floor really well. He's another good addition. And then, of course, you mentioned, Asamoah and Rob Wright, two guys in 2024 that they kind of locked up early, that they just made their decision several months ago that they were going to decide to Waco. And then obviously the lone portal grab, Jaden Nunn, I think is an underrated pickup from VCU. I think he's only 19 years old, really young, got some time left on his clock, so to speak, his college eligibility. And, he can really score the basketball, and, he's a two-way guard.
Joe, who's a team that nobody's talking about that's kind of cleaning up right now?
You mean in the transfer portal or
just maybe in general? Yeah, maybe just in general. Yeah.
The one that comes to mind immediately is North Carolina. Obviously, they grabbed several guys out of the transfer portal. Harrison Ingram, the transfer from Stanford, Jalen Withers, Cormac Ryan from Notre Dame, Paxton Wojcik from Brown, and then even in the high school ranks, they're bringing in a solid 2023 class. 2 top 50-ish players, top 30, Simeon Wiltshire, a guard, and Zayden High, a forward. But then also the most impressive thing that they've done to me is how they've already assembled their 2024 class. I think they've landed either 2 or 3, maybe even 4 guys in that 2024 class. They've already kind of got them signed up early, ready to land in Chapel Hill post-graduation, and even 2 guys specifically, 2 of their guards, Elliot Cadeau and Ian Jackson, are potential reclass candidates, so they could end up at North Carolina next season.
Joe, Ron Holland has committed to Texas for quite some time, decommitted, which they don't get much of that. And now Arkansas, Kansas again. among others. What are your thoughts on? I'm not asking you for any kind of whatever that theme is of a crystal ball, but what are your thoughts about how soon he might be connected to somebody?
Well, I think it's just a matter of time, before he makes a decision. Obviously, we're in May. He decommitted very late in the process. I was honestly surprised to see him reopen his recruitment. Especially just with the timing and all. Figured he would, maybe reopen after Beard was fired and let go, and but then he stuck around. Obviously, Texas hired Rodney Terry, and he kind of pledged to him. Reaffirmed his commitment there. And then, I haven't spoken to Ron, so I don't know what kind of changed his mind. It made a lot of sense for him to choose Texas, being an in-state kid and all. But obviously he's reopened now, and I think the professional route is going to be an option for him. And I don't think it's one that should be overlooked either. I do think if he does choose college based on not having any intel at all, that Arkansas would make the most sense, especially if Jordan Walsh stays in the NBA draft process, just because they were kind of the runner-up and they already had that prior relationship with Musselman and his staff. It would just make the most sense if he does decide that college route. But I think the G League Ignite are going to be extremely interested, and maybe even some overseas professional teams.
A lot of people in the chat room love the fact we have you on. Last question from Katie Rader. She's a Tech fan. Grant McCaslin goes from North Texas to Texas Tech. I think he was able to save a couple of guys from leaving. But otherwise, I think fans are a little bit maybe a little bit concerned. Your thoughts about what McCaslin might close with at Texas Tech?
Oh, that's a great question. I would have to do some research. I know they're in the mix for a couple other guys, but it might be hard for me to say just off the top of my head. I obviously they lost a lot with the coaching change, and being able to retain some guys as well, if possible. But one underrated pickup that I really like that they landed last month was Darion Williams from Nevada. He was a freshman there, Mountain West Freshman of the Year. And I really think that's an underrated pickup that Tech fans should be excited about.
You did great, man. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for your time. Look forward to having you on down the road. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed it.
You too. Joe Tipton. Tipton Edits, men's basketball transfer portal. A couple of you that have heard of